The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making the time available. In the next 30 minutes, we hope to give you a new view on PCI compliance and demonstrate how easy it can be to improve your compliance score. In a minute, I will turn things over to Al, but I encourage you to use the question widget to ask any questions which we will address at the end of the presentation. MainTegrity has been an IBM registered business partner since its inception, and we are now a participating member of the PCI Security Standards Council. As such, we have developed our product, FIM Plus, to augment other tools achieving better compliance with existing data security standard 3.2.1. In order to ensure better security through compliance, we are continuing to work with the Security Standards Council on version 4 of the DSS. Feel free to contact us or our sales partner, Software Diversified Services in the US, for a more in-depth discussion. Al Surratt has delivered solutions to IT problem areas for over 30 years. Al is now focused on advanced and innovative security solutions for mainframes to improve intrusion detection, incident response, and compliance. Now I will turn things over to Al for a discussion on compliance.
Thanks very much, Brandon. Hopefully we can make the next few minutes very informative, and it's really intended to be more of a discussion about compliance and the importance of compliance. But let's just move right along and get right into the subject. Everybody pretty much knows that security breaches go on far too long. IBM sponsored Ponemon report of 477 organizations that had breaches indicated that the time to identify a breach is 197 days, so 6 months or more, as some of the more recent breaches have shown us. And then further, after you've identified a breach, another 69 days to contain the breach, which means I've got to, respond and I have to recover from that. So my thought on that is that we need to do much better. The important part of this is, why should you care? And, the whole title is, who cares? Well, to be honest with it, it has to be us. And it has to be us because the cost is immense. The reputation impact can be formidable. And in fact, certainly lots of people change their voice recording and say, if you're calling us to find out about the security breach, instead of saying, I'm a home hardware store and you should probably come and buy my products, it's a pretty big question mark. Mainframes are still very important. I was a bit surprised myself to see the $7.7 trillion that are cleared through mainframes via credit card every year. And ATM transactions at a number of 29 billion per year go through mainframes as well. Those are IBM's numbers, and I think they're pretty reliable. But just the notion that a single day, 12 billion transactions move through mainframes means this is a pretty important platform, and oftentimes is the last point of record and the trusted source for everything. So what's that got to do with PCI? Well, if you deal with credit card transactions, you're governed by PCI. So who's behind PCI? Well, it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, First Day, all of the really big credit card companies in the world banded together to say, we need adequate security. Now, we're at the 3.2 point level of the data security standard. And a couple things have changed. Now, every platform needs to have file integrity monitoring in place. In addition to that, for a variety of files, but the change detection mechanism itself needs to be deployed in order for us to detect more quickly, but also to be able to respond more quickly. So in the mainframe arena, you can see examples of files that should be monitored, including system executables. Well, when we look at our IBM system, we find out that even the most sensitive ones on your authorized libraries, they're probably about 50,000 system executables. So doing file integrity monitoring or change detection in that manner by hand doesn't really work at all. You add in the application executables, this becomes an even more formidable job. Not only are we recommended to look at executables, we're recommended to look at configuration parameter files. And if it happens to be your TCP IP parameter deck that says who your mainframe can talk to on the internet, that's probably pretty important, or your CICS files, or lots of other subsystems that are critical to your operation. So with FIM Plus, our product, we address many of the 35 controls that PCI says in the DSS standard is a minimum set of security requirements. So not everything you can do, not the best security in the world, not best practices. This lays out a minimum level. As a result, if you're not compliant with PCI standards, I would argue that you're probably easily exploited, or certainly can be exploited. And that really brings you down to actually weak security. Who really cares about security, and who really cares about PCI in particular? Well, somebody has to sign something called a PCI self-assessment. And I just picked out the part where it says, who's going to sign this? Who's going to say our system, our mainframe, our Unix systems, our Windows systems are all compliant with the PCI standard? Well, as you can see here, it says it's going to be an executive officer. So who exactly is that? Well, it could be your CIO, but probably not so likely. Probably more likely it's your CFO. It could be your CEO. And not only that, we're going to probably ask in any larger organization to have this cross-checked and verified by a qualified security assessor. And that QSA, is an auditor. But you notice that who signs this is not the QSA. It is an officer from the QSA's company. So everybody that signs this, if it isn't really true, is at risk. And I can tell you today that there are no mainframes that comply with 10.5.5 and 11.5 from the 3.21 security standard. What happens if you don't comply? Well, it sort of depends on your bank, and it sort of depends on PCI, but it could be fines up to $100,000 a month. You could be suspended from handling credit card transactions, and you most certainly will have some type of reputational damage if that non-compliance gets out. The other thing that is probably highly likely is you're susceptible to a breach. So in the event that the penalties themselves weren't big enough, probably the breach makes headlines. We don't want you to be in those headlines. So probably the penalties become a small piece. The breach becomes the big risk. So is it just red tape? I don't think so. I think from that last screen, even if it was just red tape, somebody in your organization at a pretty high level cares. So what the heck are we doing about it? We don't think it's just red tape. We think we're helping you improve security. And then once we improve security, we're going to help you prove that you're compliant in every respect. So file integrity monitoring, simply, it's a simple technology that our product, FIM Plus, implements for mainframes, and we're the only guys that do that. But what's FIM all about? Very simply, it takes a snapshot of your files and it stores that away as a baseline. It creates a hashing key, it puts it in an encrypted vault, and stores that for as long as you want that version to stay around. So we deal with multiple versions of applications, multiple versions of systems, all that sort of stuff. But what the key element is here is we know what the trusted state is, and that's stored in the baseline. Later on, we can take as many snapshots as you want, as often as you want. And those snapshots will be compared to the keys that are in the vault. And if they're the same, we say everything's good. And if they're not the same, then we raise an alert. So FIM tools have been in place for Unix, Windows, and other platforms for quite a long time, but there's never really been a solution for mainframes. So what do we actually protect? What do we look at on the mainframe? Well, system and application executables, source members, configuration environments, JCL proc labs, scripts, C-lists. We can do comparison of encrypted files without having to decrypt them. We protect your log files. In the mainframe environment, we also protect your Unix files. So ZSF files and HSF files are all included in what we do right out of the box. We basically, when we find something that's wrong, we raise an alert. And that alert can be delivered to your enterprise console like Splunk or QRadar, or and as well, it can be sent out as email or text directly to your mainframe admin folks that will probably want to be aware of this problem before somebody else calls them. So we often say, because we look at the content of files, we say that other tools that are event monitoring tools hope that your changes were correct, whereas FIM actually goes out and examines the content and proves it. So what is that exactly? Well, it's a way to detect intrusions more quickly. So we compare bit by bit so that every auditor that comes in and asks you, is this application still at the right level? Is this system still at the right level? You can confidently say, yep, we've done a bit by bit comparison recently and they're still correct. And if you want to see that in real time, go ahead. Here's the nice GUI interface. Click on this and make yourself happy. So we identify attacks that bypass other tools. Stolen credentials, according to Microsoft, are in the millions and are available on the web for purchase. So if you're a big organization, you can pretty much count on the fact that there are stolen credentials for your organization already available there. But there are other known exposures in the mainframe environment that we help you deal with. So if you get a new copy of code in from IBM or one of your third-party suppliers, you might want to verify that those modules haven't been modified in the 6 or 12 months since you received them from IBM before you actually put them into production. So we can help you with those kinds of things. Whereas anybody else that's not examining content can't really detect those problems and can't really help you deal with them. We reduce false alarms. Every security product, including FIM+, raises false alarms. By verifying, by corroborating this information with event monitoring information, we can see exactly which ones are valid and which ones aren't. So that becomes a key element in my mind in why it takes companies so long to determine that they have a problem. It's because they have so many false alarms that They just can't deal with them all, so they start ignoring them all. In our environment, we provide corroborating information. So even if you've had some problems with your RACF or ACF2 rules, or you've had some issues with maybe a missing log file or some data that got corrupted somewhere along the line, we can cross-verify that stuff to make sure that you're not missing anything. Another thing that we can do is, because we're fully integrated with ServiceNow and Remedy and other change management environments, we can actually suppress items that were approved changes. So we go read if there was a change that was supposed to be affecting this particular module, and if that was true, then we just suppress that change. And that's a default that you can set. Maybe you want to look at them all, but probably not. Probably you want us to screen out everything that we can to reduce the false alarms. And then when you raise an alarm, everybody can get excited about it. And so it operates with most of the change management system. It also works retroactively. So if you ever had rules that weren't right or a corruption in your files, we actually go look at the content to make sure it's the same as the last trusted state. So we go compare it to that baseline. I mean, if you don't have a baseline, you can create a baseline from a backup tape or things that you know. So once you're on the FIM system, we'll never forget what the right state is, and we'll be able to report that to you in seconds anytime you want. And we can audit both application and system deployments. Because we understand the concept of versions, we can say, are you at the right version level of this application? Is it with in-depth forensics? We can go in and say, what are the missed changes, or did you have to back this application out after the deployment? Is it correct? Did I get back, if I was implementing version 1.1 and I needed to back out to version 1.0, did I get everything reversed? Are all the contents of the files ready for me to go forward with, even in the case of backup? So it's a pretty powerful tool for your deployment team. However, I think probably the most exciting thing that we can do for you is when you have a problem. So faster incident response, I would like to say instant incident response, but it's pretty close. We log successes in our log files. So we know when the last time that this particular module was tested and found correct. That gives us the beginning of time when an attack could have taken place. So as we move into the response phase, so this is a classic NIST kind of process where you step through the various response activities. First we have to detect, and we've already told you about the fact that our detection is more advanced and provides all that cross-reference information. But the second thing we do, the second that there's a detection, then we can tell you that the alarm was verified. We know that that's an issue because it's not authorized and it's not at the right level, that sort of thing. Whereas with a basic detection or response environment, I have to go find that out by some sort of manual means. Is it a false alarm or is it for real? Nice to know that with FIM Plus right up front. Next thing is we know why that took place. Well, how do we know that? Because we go to your change management system, and the change management system, amongst other things, is probably going to tell us why. Why did you do that? That's an authorized change. Why was it going in? Okay, now, how many components were affected? Well, if I'm dealing with only event data, which is files open, files closed sort of thing, I have a hard time trying to understand exactly all of the components that were affected. Whereas if I go through with FIM processing, I can right away tell where the content got changed, so I know the scope of the attack. Otherwise, I kind of have to deal with, I wonder how many more modules were a problem. And if I know the attack interval, okay, I know when the problem started, and I know the current time. If I know that, you know, I don't have to fuss around with how many event records should I look at. So right away, I only review the accesses that are in that interval. And, you know, that might be ones or twos or dozens or 20 records since the last scan, since the known good interval. So it's a really small number of records to look at. So all of a sudden, I can know who did it pretty quickly because I don't have to look at a few dozen records. In a classic response, I might have to go back to the beginning of time. And I say here, kind of, you might have to review thousands of records. You might have to review millions of records. So it is quite a different situation. Again, all of this is just set up for, I'd like to get this problem fixed. So I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to take some corrective action. But you know, in our environment, not only can we show you which modules were affected, we can actually invoke the compare process on your mainframe that already exists, and we can show you which lines in a particular configuration parameter or anything that's text-based source, those kinds of things, C lists. We can actually show you the lines that changed. So all of a sudden, we're presented with an awful lot more information about what the heck the corrective action should be. So I say this takes minutes. Because it's all automated, it may take seconds. So by the time a person reacts to the text message that they got on their phone, all this information is basically available. Otherwise, hopefully you might be able to respond in weeks or months. But that's where that containment issue of 69 days on the first slide came from. So the other thing that's nice about this is all this information is presented in one place. So if I've got new people that are joining the team, I can correlate information from multiple sources for them. I can present it to them in one place, and then it's pretty simple for them to start taking the right actions. What does that actually look like? Well, I just threw up a copy of our GUI on the screen here, and you can see a couple of things here about how it works, you know, where the drill down is. But if I see this failed alarm come up, the next thing I want to do is drill down on that. Tell me when the last good reference was. Tell me what the current time is. Tell me what the interval is. Tell me what environment I was running in. And by the way, tell me what change this is associated to, if it was associated with a change. So pretty simple stuff, but pretty powerful. Now, if I was to punch this compare key, you know, wouldn't I like to know what really changed? What line got changed? So in this example, which isn't really factual, we're talking about a TCP/IP port number. Well, try to imagine somebody with false credentials gets into your system and simply changes the port address from one in New York to one in Russia. Probably not a really good thing to have happen. So again, we want to make it really easy for you to take the right action and to complement the other tools that are already in place. Okay, so now where does that get us to? Well, we have strengthened your security a lot because you can detect changes you couldn't before, and you can react to them more quickly. So that's the whole purpose here. Once you got good security, then we want to help you prove that. And we help you prove that with continuous monitoring. So if we go back again to the regulations, they say you have to compare, amongst other things, your 50,000 odd APF members like once a week. to make sure they haven't changed. Well, you know, that's not so easy to do. And you really can't verify the content. So why wouldn't you let us do that, you know, whenever you want in a few seconds? Then we provide you improved reporting. Remember I told you we put success records in our log files? Well, we pull those out, and then we can prove to an auditor that we've been doing this on a regular basis. When I say a regular basis, I'm thinking more like every hour for very sensitive systems, every day for less important systems. But the other thing that we give you is the separation, full separation of responsibilities. So if the auditor wants to do this job themselves, which of course frees you up, then they can get conclusive proof by using the same GUI that anybody else would use in looking at that data. So now we're in a little different situation. We can finish the audit, and for the IT guys that are usually associated with that, scurrying around trying to find reports and prove things, they get back to work doing their real job much faster. The audit itself completes more quickly. So you save time and dollars on the audit. And now the people that have to sign off can sign off with confidence. So what is FIM Plus all about? It's a product that runs on the mainframe. It can run all on the mainframe, or you can feed information to your enterprise console. You can react from either end. You can bring up the GUI, you can bring up the 3270 interface, whatever you want to do. So you can configure the product in whatever way you want to run according to how you want to do the business. But, you know, we don't need you to change anything in your environment. So there's no requirement for application changes, no requirement for content changes whatsoever. We go in and the product itself auto-discovers where your APF libraries are, auto-discovers what your configuration libraries look like and where they're located, decides, unless you tell it differently, that everything should be monitored on an ongoing basis, and then proceeds to do that monitoring on whatever interval you tell it to do it on. So it can be regular timestamp, can be random, it can be pseudo-random, can be on-demand, all that sort of stuff. But that gets us to what we really want to do, which is zero admin. So because we drive this from auto-discovery to begin with, it means that the amount of administration that you have to do on an ongoing business is near zero. It isn't zero completely, but there is so little to do. All you have to do is say, what kind of scanning do you want to do and what frequency? Okay, we don't protect everything in the world. We work with your existing products. We share information. We have REST APIs built in if you want full integration, or you can just throw in a standard job step if you want to update your application deployment process to say, do a scan before and after deployment to make sure that I got the right stuff there. It makes you compliant by improving your mainframe security. And then we go out and help you prove you are compliant with better reporting. So it allows your staff to make the right decisions right off the bat. So this is really important when you start talking about a generation of mainframe support folks that are getting more help from people that don't have as much in-depth knowledge about the mainframe. So this product was designed for the future as well as the present. And you can complete your incident response in a fraction of the time that's required otherwise, because you know the answer to a whole bunch of questions by the time the alert is reported. So with that, I kind of go, okay, now you know what we do in PCI environment. What's really holding you back in this context? Do you need it? Well, we think you needed it years ago. We actually think you desperately need it today because hackers are getting better, they're getting more inventive, and mainframes are high value targets. So there's no doubt that hackers in North Korea and Russia and China are looking at the vulnerable points. And if the mainframe becomes the most vulnerable point, then by golly, that's exactly where they're going to go. So we can help you in a lot of different ways. You could call us up and say, I'd like to know more about this. Can you do a demo for me? Or could you expand on a few things in that incident response, or can you give me a deep dive on how this works? Sure, you can call us. We'd be happy to do that. We think the best thing is just to put it up on your site because the install is so quick and because the results are so forthcoming so quickly. We think that you should be able to install this in an hour, and in the second hour, you should get worthwhile results that you've never been able to get on your system before. And as a result, you can complete an assessment in next to no time, and you can go to your management and say, we've just taken a real big step forward in our security environment. So we talked a little bit about zero admin and auto discovery functions, but we want this to be no risk for everybody. We believe so strongly that PCI is a good indicator of security, of your underlying security, that we want to be involved with that organization, but we really want you to be as convinced as we are. So we want you to be able to put it up, try it, and if in some manner that we can't imagine, you don't think it improves your PCI compliance, and for that matter, your underlying security, then we'll just give you all your money back. That's pretty straightforward. So just a bit of a reminder on breaches in general. 6 months. 6 months or more. That's unforgivable. So at the end of the day, it's really about who gets hung out. So PCI compliance, it's an indicator. It's a bunch of rules. It has some teeth, but at the end of the day, who cares? Well, there's a surprising number of people that care. And I think realistically, you should care. And you should not only care, you should do something about it. So with that, I'm going to say, thanks for listening to me today. I really hope that it was useful. We are doing a series of webinars. The next one is incident response in a heartbeat, where we drill down a little bit more into how to get ready for your recovery and how to make that happen in a much more rapid manner than has ever been capable before. We're not alone in this area. We think we're a leader, but we really depend on, PCI to provide guidance. We depend on NIST to give us protocols for reaction and a really good understanding of where this all comes together. If you want to look at more stuff around that we do with respect to our product, by all means, either give me a call or take a look at our website. But I know there's some people that have joined us and haven't joined us on the call today. And I really want to say thanks to Stu Henderson, to Robert Hansel, to Mark Wilson, Chad Rickensrud. These guys are really leaders in IT security. And I think you would do very, very well if you need people to help you in this area with overall security requirements. They have really helped us. They have helped us focus on the problems. They have helped us focus on the answers. And I would really recommend they are totally worth a call. And again, if you have any trouble finding any of them, please just give me a call. And we think you should start today, because surprisingly enough, probably tomorrow will make itself busy on its own. So with that, I will I'll pretty much turn things over to questions and back to Brandon. So Brandon, if you've got a couple questions for me, let's go at it.
Okay, we did in fact get a couple of questions from the audience. First one, are there consulting services available to help roll out this FIM Plus product?
Yes, of course. If you need more assistance, we think it installs itself and configures itself. But we're certainly very happy to help out in any way we can to put this in place. But of course, there are other people, as we've already mentioned, folks that can help you in a broader security context. So, you know, our partner in the U.S. is SDS, and I would certainly not hesitate to call them about all of their solutions. And as we went through, you know, Stu and Robert and Mark and Chad would be great guys to call on. So, anything else, Brandon?
Yeah. How often should I be running these FIM scans? Is there associated overhead involved?
We get that we actually get that question quite a bit, and it is so fast. You know, we're talking about most of these scans taking, even for 50,000 members, taking a second of CPU time or less. We think that you can run scans substantially whenever you want. So we had talked to one customer about running them every 10 minutes because they had 10-minute backups on some of the data that they wanted. But for the most part, I think if you run them every hour for very sensitive applications and systems, and you run them sort of once a day or some random basis, that's probably pretty sufficient. And you would just never find anything with respect to it being a high utilization application at all. And that's in a big part because most of the heavy lifting is offloaded to the crypto cards to begin with. So in doing that, we've really created a situation where you can run it whenever you want.
Great, thank you. One more question from the audience. What are the penalties for non-compliance?
Actually, the short answer on that is it sort of depends who you're dealing with. So PCI itself and the banks will have some pretty hefty penalties. And I put them in, but I think when you get into the field, you'll find that real experience varies. So I know we talk about $200,000 per infraction. I think that's a MasterCard rule, sort of. But I think I would want to be very careful in your own organization to find out what and how those penalties are applied. But let me tell you, probably the biggest single one is just the fact that because you're not compliant, it means your security is somewhat substandard, and that leaves you exposed to a breach. So with that comment, I think we'll wrap things up here, and hopefully that discussion was useful for everybody on the call. Brandon, any last thoughts from you?
Well, it seems to be all the questions from the audience. I would just like to say thank you very much for your attendance. A recording of this presentation will be provided on our YouTube channel within the next couple of days, and you should be hearing from us at some point in the next couple of days as well.
Okay, that's great. I'll add my thanks to Brandon's, and of course, if you need to get a hold of us, just look for us on the web, MainTegrity.com.
Thank you guys very much.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.